Morning everybody, Steve Isaacs from XAIS. I mean, you guys, a lot of you are from local authority, so you should know how you specify or how you find that you need high friction surfacing. And there's whole life costing and value assessments that you're required to take into consideration now through well-managed highways, replacing well-maintained highways in about 3 months' time, and you're likely to be audited, or some people will be audited on whether they comply with that document. So I'm here today to sort of say, and just remind you, really, as a local authority, how do you decide, using the rules at the moment, the asset management requirements, that you actually might want high friction surfacing. So, managing the road skid resistance is a legal requirement placed on you as local authority staff and officers. It's in the design manual for road and bridges. I'm sure it will be in the update as well, and it's referenced through and comes to HD 2815. 28 has always been around. 15 says it was introduced in 2015. I think it was 2004 before that, 2804. So since 2015, you've meant to be looking at, and should certainly be now, complying with HD 2815. Probably 50% of authorities across the country, and we work across the whole of England, don't comply. How many people have got a skid policy for their authority that has been addressed since 2015? It's been updated since 2015, yeah? Which authority are you? Cornwall. Yeah, it was with Andy Stevens down there, whatever, I'm sure, yeah, he's aware of it, and very much asset management has been his bag for some time. And certainly Devon has been probably at the forefront and has had policies on anti-skid. I think it leads the country with its policies on anti-skid in Devon and what they've done here. So very, very locally, there's some great examples. But the country as a whole fails to meet. And I've been unfortunate enough over my time with local authorities to be the person that's standing and explaining to a judge why a road was, whatever skid resistance it was, and using pendulums back in those days when I was doing that, it was before the HD came along, and saying when there's been a fatality and trying to mitigate the authorities' position. So it's very serious stuff, is managing the skid resistance of your road surface. So now we have to do it in line with well-managed highways, which leans heavily on risk assessing and asset management. What is asset management? So asset managers have to know what they've got. First of all, you can't manage an asset if you don't know what that asset is. Not as simple as it sounds. There's a lot of authorities don't actually know exactly what network they own. They also need to know, put it into a hierarchy to say what level of transport is using it and how they're going to maintain each part or each section of that road. So once you've actually got what we're going to manage, what your asset is, and you've found out what that is, then you need to find out what condition it's in. You need to here scrim test the grip, or some authorities. I think Devon's got a grip tester and uses the grip tester locally, but the scrim is more common throughout the country. And I think there's somebody here from WDM who will probably go into a lot more detail on what scrims do. But that's how you assess the condition of your network. So you've got your network, you've got your condition, and that's just a close-up of the wheel that skids along the road on a scrim machine. And also, when your asset, you need to know gradients, bends, accidents. You need to know if it's actually a risky area, if there is accidents occurring, and all that data is available on the Stats 19 DFT website, so it's not a secret. You don't have to find somebody in the authority who might have some accident data that you've got to go and persuade them to give you. You can actually go onto the website and anybody can do it, find out what accidents has been where. So you've got your Stats 19, you need your gradients, your bends to set the level as to what skid resistance you're going to need. And the little diagram there is you need to monitor the line is where the bit that we said didn't reach the standard that it was needed to for scrim, and it highlighted that there was 2 accidents. You need to go into those accidents and have a look to see if they were wet skid and actually relevant to what we're talking about today. And you need to see if they were or they weren't on the location that we're talking about, because the accuracy of where accidents are plotted at the moment is poor. So you might go into there and actually find that those two accidents were on your skid site, or you might find that they weren't, and you can disregard them. So you've got to do quite a bit of work while you're actually assessing what condition your road network is. And then you have to decide what condition you'll accept. Every 3 years you have to look at your IL levels. You must check your investigatory levels for your road network on a 3-yearly basis and decide if they are correct. Most authorities cannot afford to comply fully with the specification for highway works and HD 2815 in its entirety. So majority of authorities write their own skid policy and skid procedure like this. This is one we did for Liverpool Key Route Network. So if anybody hasn't got an up-to-date policy and procedure, you have no excuse, because you don't have to pay for it. You can probably go onto the RSTA website and you can pull one off, and with a very minimum effort you can have one that complies, that you could put to your councillors, you can make your decisions, and you can get a policy. Alternatively, you can employ us to come along and help you. But you must have that policy in place to say why you're setting investigatory levels where you are setting them, if they're any different to HD 2815. So, there's no nationally defined recommendations for SCRIM coverage. I think pretty much every authority does their A-class roads. Most authorities do their B. Some do Cs. You'd need to write down in your skid policy what you're going to do. If you don't, then HD 28 says all classified network. So somebody could pull you up for not doing Cs. They could say, why haven't you scrimmed it? And if you just say, oh, we can't afford it, or we don't do Cs, if you haven't written that down in your policy, you're in the wrong. Okay, so you need to, that's why we need a policy. That's a typical example of why you need your policy, so that when you decide you're not going to do all your C network, which most people don't, or on your hierarchy going forward, if you have 12 different hierarchies, if you say we're only going to go down to number 7, then you need to write that in your policy and say that's where we cut off and why. There's one thing about the runs, the skid, the scrim, it's only seasonal that you can do it, and that's the reason why. That's a really old. I mean, it says laboratory report 738. I think TRL laboratory reports now are like 3,000 and so on. So this is years and years old, but it does show you the difference there. If you look at the numbers, 0.45 there on the number 2, up to 0.6 sideways force coefficient. As Howard said, that isn't PSV, that's sideways force coefficient measured from a scrim. Massive variations throughout the year, so you can only do your scrim. I think it's between May and September. The other factors which also affect skid resistance, ambient temperature, test speed. A lot of people report that their failure on scrim at a certain percentage and don't actually take the data into account. And if you look, and there's some places where it's going too slow and that data wouldn't necessarily be correct, and that doesn't necessarily mean the road fails, but you need to check it. So test speed. Don't just take the data that comes as carte blanche. You need to have a look at it and work with your supplier. Weather conditions, traffic flow. WDM are highlighted here today. PTS also do it. And as I said, there's a number of authorities who do grip testing. I'm not sure actually if the grip tester is currently calibrated with the scrim. The scrim always go down to TRL on an annual basis and are calibrated. Once upon a time, the grip testers used to follow them round the day after, but I don't think that's been done for many years now, so I don't think that the correlations are kept up to date. So your skid resistance policy, aligned with national guidelines, but not actually national guidelines, revised in 2015. When you get your scrim data and you've got your investigative levels, which you've set and you've checked every 3 years, you get your UK PMS. Processing of scrim is simple. Sideways force coefficient equals the figure that you're sending through and should be investigated. Then authorities should review, investigate 3 years. A site at or below investigated, reviewed most 3-year crash data. Pull all this together. This is all stage 1, desktop study, done in the office when you've got your scrim results. You compare your accident sites. After review, and doing that if it's concerned, you must visit that site. Typically in an authority, well, a Highways England area, which isn't necessarily got anywhere near the network that you guys have, there were Area 7, over 1,000 sites needed to be visited last year because they failed on scrim and accidents and significantly enough to do that. East Sussex we did, and I think there was 470 sites in East Sussex needed to be visited after they'd done the desk study. So there's about 2,000 sites will come up as failure easily in a typical authority, as in they don't meet the scrim requirements. But then when you've done the accident data and you've looked at your IL levels, there's still about 500 that need to visit. They must be visited. That's the requirement in HD 2815 or your SKID policy. You will visit them. Once you've required a detailed investigation, we get a list of sites that need to be visited and a RAG map. That's typically of a RAG map that you've got, and you'll have of reds need to be visited. They fail on accidents. They fail on scrim, and you go out and visit the sites. You must ask really straightforward questions. Typically, you can't just go out and investigate it and say, I'm going to use my experience, because that's lethal when you get in front of a judge. You need a set of 25, 30, 45 questions. We use 40 questions typically, and you ask typically yes, no answers. Is there overhanging trees? Is the site flushed up? Is there the lining in good condition? Things that you can write yes, no answers on. Because when you get pulled up and there's been an accident and you're actually having to justify this, then you need to be straightforward. Why did you make the decisions you made? You can't just have somebody going out and giving it in their opinion. And that would be typically site, yes, we need to do something about this site. Output from a detailed survey. And then you've got the choice. You don't instantly say, right, I've got a site that fails, I must use high friction servicing, because this is for your whole network. It isn't just for your dangerous site. So although that's a junction, for your whole network, you find out. So you've got a choice of what you're going to do now. It doesn't have to cost you money. You might want to monitor and resurvey. Put up slippery road signs. That's a good one, because a lot of people put slippery road signs up, but they don't have a policy how they're going to take them down again. So there's an awful lot of slippery road signs around the country that are meaningless. Surface stress, retexture, high friction surfacing, or resurface it entirely. And that's the decisions you've got to sit there and make. High friction surfacing should probably be the solution if high risk site, and especially if there's high friction surfacing there already. Removing it is a real difficult thing. The public know it's there, the public see it. If you remove it, you've got to have a pretty good reason in your policy why you're removing it and be able to justify why you're doing that. So existing sites. And then there's all those reasons that, you decide, there's no point in putting a 12-year life product on a road surface that's only got 4 or 5 years left in it. HAPAS is good. It's essential, it's needed, or equivalent now, as PTS is equivalent. Yes. And then it's whole life costing, really, isn't it, with asset management? Cost over life, meters squared. Ideally, I know some haven't got the funds, we're going to go to a cheaper solution, but that inevitably means you get not the life you wanted and you get complaints. So, asset management principles would suggest whole life costing comes into it. You work out what you can afford, best solution, and go forward. And that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I just here to reiterate what local authority people should be doing. That's really what's the decision process for choosing how you're going to manage the roads. If you're not, then you need to get hold of HD 2815 and fully understand it. Thank you.